between Columbia and the Singapore education system is that I feel the faculty are a lot more enthusiastic
Here. Yeah.
Right? And they are a lot more passionate about their work. The passion is definitely palpable when you hear them teach, when you hear them talk about stuff that they are interested in. And I feel that they don't just see teaching as a job, they see it as a way of sharing what they love. And I think that's really contagious, and that's what makes classes here so enjoyable. It's naturally like challenging. You'll hear a lot of peers talking about like getting GPAs of like 4 and stuff.
Right.
But I think it's just a way of life that you eventually get into, and maybe in a certain sense the pressure kind of
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. I appreciate your patience as we just wanted to give people some time to join. So it looks like we have quite a good number of you here. And yeah, I'm really excited to discuss why Columbia University, in my humble opinion, is the best university in the world, speaking objectively, of course. But before I do, I'll just give you an introduction into the series. You'll notice that there are some polls coming up. Please let us know where you're visiting from. But this event today is the first of a series of webinars that Crimson Education is running in cooperation with the Columbia University Alumni Committee of the UAE. So I'm pretty lucky because I get to be part of both organizations as the regional manager of Crimson here and a Columbia University alumna and member of the board. And we've noticed that there are a lot of people, a lot of Columbia graduates here in the UAE who are graduates of postgrad or business school programs. And so my goal here is to really inspire more students to apply to Columbia as undergrads. And that's what we're going to cover today. Just give you a brief introduction about myself. I'm a regional manager of Crimson Education, which specializes in helping students get to elite universities like Columbia. I myself went to DC. I was born in the UAE. And I would say that I probably I took as full advantage of the Columbia experience as any student could. And I'm going to share some of that personal experience that I had with you today. For instance, I started a blockchain-based company while I was at university. I went through the IBM Blockchain Accelerator, the first cohort in New York. I received the Columbia Innovation Award, took part in the Holt Prize Ivy, the Holt Prize being the largest student social venture competition in the world, and graduated magna cum laude from Columbia with a degree in anthropology and Middle Eastern studies. I also participated in 2 of Columbia's study abroad programs. So we'll be covering why Columbia is a global university. Now, although this session today is broadly about information about Columbia and why it's such an amazing institution, we will be touching a little bit on how to get in, but we'll be covering that more later in this series. So we're going to be running one event per month from January till July. And I want you to keep your ears peeled and maybe even take notes, because at the end of the series, we'll be doing a quiz where we're going to give away some really cool Columbia merch and even an internship for high school students to intern with the Columbia University Alumni Board. So please make sure you're paying attention, get your parents and family members to help you in case you miss anything, because I'm very excited about this prize. Just some information about Crimson, who is sponsoring this event. We do support students with elite university preparation. You can see some of our results there, including 32 to Columbia and 300 plus to the Ivy League generally. If you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A tab. I'll be monitoring that one more than the chat. So leave the chat for other things. Questions will go in the Q&A tab. If I ask you guys a question, that's what you can write in the chat for, because I'll be reading that. Briefly about Crimson. Crimson helps with US and UK university admission strategy, extracurricular and leadership coaching, essay writing and development, and also things like tutoring, internships, goal setting, that kind of thing. But let's get started. Columbia, if I could sum it up in one sentence, would really be a global university. It is in the city of New York. And just by nature of being in the city of New York, it has things that you wouldn't be able to get at any other university. I mean, it's right by the United Nations. It's by some pretty global financial institutions. It has a direct link to Wall Street. So let's go through some fast facts. Oops. All right, here we go. Columbia University is older than the United States. It used to be called King's College. And if you see the main hall of Columbia University, it actually still has the inscription of King's College. When the United States of America got its independence, the name was changed to Columbia University after Christopher Columbus, although Columbus Day is actually not celebrated at Columbia University. It's the home of the Pulitzer Prize. So the building that you see on this slide is Pulitzer Hall or Journalism Hall, where the prize ceremony actually happens. Columbia is also the home of 96 Nobel Prize winners. These numbers are a little bit contested. There's different information on different websites, so please forgive me if it's slightly different to that. Columbia contains the most filmed college classroom, which is a really interesting fact. Columbia has educated 34 presidents and prime ministers, including Barack Obama, who you see there, 90 Pulitzer Prize winners, and is the second largest landowner in New York City after the Catholic Church. So a big, global, and important institution. Now, Columbia in the movies. I'm sorry, my screen is way too sensitive here. I didn't know any of this when I applied to Columbia, but it has Havemeyer Hall, which you see pictured. You may recognize it from movies such as Spider-Man and several others. It's the most filmed classroom in the US. Columbia is also tied with USC for having the most Oscar winners. I had the great opportunity to take a documentary film class with an award-winning documentarian. And that's one of the coolest things about this university is you can take incredible courses with people who, literally wrote the textbooks you're reading or who have gone out, been there, done that, and got the t-shirt. And Columbia also inspired the famous MGM Studios logo. So this guy here is our mascot. His name is Rory the Lion, and he is the inspiration for the famous MGM logo. Now, we talked a little bit about Columbia I'm so sorry about my screen there. We talked a little bit about Columbia being a global university. You may recognize some of these faces, and here's where I want to hear from you. See if you can name everyone on this page. Let's monitor the chat and see what people are saying. So you might recognize some old pictures, some new pictures, but what is very clear is that Columbia's famous graduates span every industry. We have a founding father here. We have a former president. We have two actors, two famous legal figures, actually two former presidents, a writer, and a musician. So Debansh, you've guessed Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is correct. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is this lovely lady, second from the left. Obama, thank you, Noor. Johan, Barack Obama, George Washington. Actually, it's Alexander Hamilton, but very close. Alexander Hamilton, founding father of the United States. James Franco, thank you, Noor. Alexander Hamilton, also the namesake of the famous musical, which you might have heard about. Yes, we do not have any other founding fathers on there, so just the one. I'll give you the rest. I'll read them clockwise from Obama. We have Obama there with his grandparents. That's actually taken at Columbia. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, James Franco, Alexander Hamilton, Teddy Roosevelt, although FDR Roosevelt also attended Columbia, as well as President Eisenhower, who was president of the University of Columbia, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Jack Kerouac, you may know the writer, and Garfunkel, Art Garfunkel, I think, right? So Some people actually say that the Beat Generation was founded at Columbia because it's where Jack Kerouac met some of his other fellow writers and where they started swapping ideas, which I think is just super cool. I can actually imagine the place where this happened. There's a very famous Hungarian pastry cafe right on campus which is kind of covered with memorabilia, and it's exactly the place you'd imagine Jack Kerouac meeting his fellow writers. Global engagement. So we talked about this as a global university. Columbia has centers in Amman, Beijing, Istanbul, Mumbai, Nairobi, Paris, Rio, Santiago, and Tunis. So this means that students can actually take Columbia classes with professors in these places. I have personally studied in our centers in Amman and Paris, but I have also done a program in Brazil. Columbia offers 150 study abroad programs. So if you want a global experience, this is the university for you. We also have 20 World Leaders Forum events and 500 plus clubs and organizations. You can see that it's an amazing university for opportunities beyond the classroom. I made very regular use of our 3-story gym, which is actually located underneath the university. You can see it here. There is a yoga studio, there are basketball and football courts, swimming pools, TRX rooms. But beyond sports, there's incredible labs. So I took a class called Physics for Poets and actually got to see the place where radioactive materials are stored, of course, behind many, 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 many barriers, which I couldn't go past for obvious reasons. Columbia offers funding for its student initiatives. So not only do you have the space and place to explore what it is that you want to explore your subject, your passion. But if you want to create an idea or a company, you can apply for funding. It's something that I took advantage of and managed to raise $15,000 from a grant from the university to fund my startup. So there's so much support for any of you who are entrepreneurially minded. And even if it's not funding that the university gives you, they will certainly give you access to the network. So if you're a student entrepreneur at Columbia, there's a design thinking lab that you're allowed to apply to, where they will give you kind of free courses, sessions, workshops on design thinking and building a product and the lean startup model. And then there's also networking events designed for students, like pitch days, demo days, where you can meet potential funders and investors. And finally, although I didn't take advantage of Greek life, there's an additional layer of networking for students who want to join sororities and fraternities. It's very different to the kind of Greek life, sorority life, fraternity life that you would expect at a big American university like Arizona or Penn State. It's much smaller. It's much more tame, I would say. But I know students who participated in Greek life and found it to be extremely valuable for making friends, especially if you're international, you don't know anyone when you get there. Now, I'll caveat all this by saying Columbia is not great at sports. So at many sports, we're good in some things like fencing, I think. But if you want to be an athlete seriously, you might be better off at a place like Penn State or Arizona State. But if you want a place where you can get access to the best sporting facilities, get onto an Ivy League team, compete in an athletic capacity, but also have a world-class education, then Columbia is certainly an amazing option. One of the things that I loved about studying at this university is that it's a perfect blend of old and new. So the picture that you see in front of you, the building, is called Butler Library. It's a very old library. It's absolutely beautiful. And it was one of my favorite places to study. I love to just go there during exam week, zone out, and get lost in my books for 8 or 9 hours. And it's quite fun because you actually enjoy what you're reading, so it doesn't feel like work. I loved anthropology and I loved the stuff that I was working on, but everyone else is there too, so it's social. You get up and your friends are at a few tables across from you. But if the old Harry Potter style library isn't your scene, then we also have amazing options that are more modern, lighter, perhaps more comfortable, like Milstein Library, which you see in the lower picture. Milstein Library was completed in 2019. It's brand new, and it's actually part of Barnard. Some of you on the call might not be familiar with what Barnard is, but Barnard is the women's college at Columbia. So it is part of the undergraduate colleges. There are 4 undergraduate colleges of Columbia: Columbia College, GS, the engineering school, and Barnard. It used to be where all women who wanted to study at Columbia would go, but now it's just another alternative. So Barnard students take Columbia classes with other Columbia students, but they have their own female dorms, which are apparently much better than the rest of the Columbia dorms. And they have a really progressive, female empowering curriculum. So if any of you parents out there are looking for an option that's a bit safer, a single sex option where girls can go and live in a female only environment, but still attend, co-ed classes and still have that Columbia degree, Barnard is a great option. Barnard also has a slightly higher acceptance rate than Columbia, but this gap is closing as more and more students learn about it. One of my favorite opportunities to take advantage of Columbia at Columbia was the World Leaders Forum. So because it's in the city of New York, it has a really well-developed connection to the United Nations. So every year there would be talks with world leaders where students were invited to attend, and they would usually be cats, so it's quite an intimate experience. I got to hear President Poroshenko, I got to hear the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Secretary General of the United Nations, and I actually got invited to a private meeting with Jacinda Ardern, but I was away, so I didn't get to make it. But these are opportunities that I would never have believed would be available to me, and they're just available to everyone. If you go to a university like Columbia, you can see some of past speakers include Queen Rania, or His Highness King Abdullah, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Bill Clinton, Sarkozy, Boris Johnson, Madeleine Albright. And this happens every year. Another defining factor about Columbia would be the liberal arts curriculum. So this is one of the things that I think Columbia would want students to talk about in their application essays, for instance. The core curriculum is very special, and the university is extremely proud of it. So when students apply, they want students to know that, they want to know that the students really have a deep understanding of what the core curriculum is and that they see the value in it. The core curriculum was introduced in 1919, and it focuses on helping students build really strong foundations, intellectual foundations, and have a broad understanding of, contemporary civilization. Now, of course, there's some discourse about the core curriculum and about making it more, or expanding it, making it a little bit more global, because it has a huge emphasis on Western thinkers and ancient Greek and ancient Roman philosophers. And so there is this movement, a movement that I very much support, to also include philosophers and thinkers from other parts of the world. Now, traditionally, students have had to take mandatory classes like literature humanities, which is a course that explores philosophy and foundational literary texts from the last few centuries, and contemporary civilization, which looks at philosophical trends, plus masterpieces of Western art, Art Hum, and masterpieces of Western music, Music Hum. Because I had taken art history as an A-level, and I had always done music my whole life, I felt like I was already quite familiar with Western art and music, Mozart, artists such as Da Vinci, and art movements like abstract expressionism. I decided instead to take the alternative option, which was arts and music, art of East Asia, so covering China, Korea, and Japan, and music of West Asia and India. mostly focusing on Indian and Arab music. This, to me, was an option that complemented what I already knew, and it was great that it was on offer. Students who want to take a more global approach can also choose to complete their requirements for Art Hum and Music Hum at Berlin or Paris. So you can do German music and German art, or French music and French art, and actually study at the global centers in Europe. Spending the summer in Paris as a Columbia student is something incredible, because Columbia has a center called Reed Hall. So they own the campus. It used to be a private boarding school for girls. It's now a very thriving community where PhD students studying in France, visiting scholars, professors, and students from the university can make their home in Europe. So in any summer, there will probably be 4 or 5 courses for undergraduates running in Paris. So for me, I took Arabic in Paris, and I took Migration, Displacement, and Diaspora, which looked at migration and the refugee movements in Europe. But I had friends studying French there. I had friends doing their art and music hum there. So it was really a community of like 50, 60 students, all studying in Paris, students who we knew, our friends, all at the same time. So incredible, incredible experience. Yeah, so the core at Columbia really is a way of thinking. It's a way to engage with foundational texts that kind of form the basis of major institutions like the law, or just the kind of philosophical precepts on which so much of our society is built on today. So Columbia wants you to understand that source, and it also wants to create what we might call a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman, someone who has a specialization in engineering or linguistics or anthropology, but also is able to engage with discourse in a broader way, and really has a well-rounded and well-shaped vision of the world that takes into account, technological aspects, human aspects, sociological, political, economic aspects of every problem. I would say that Columbia really taught me how to debate, and how to, more than anything else, it was about critical thinking. So I think with any Ivy League education, you don't really go there for necessarily the information that you will learn. You could find all of that out on Coursera for free. What you go there for is the knowledge of how to think critically, and the network effect of being with all these brilliant people, professors, peers, and I guess companies and organizations too that connect with the university. So now I'll talk a little bit about my experience at Columbia, because it's what I know. I mentioned to you that I took full advantage of the Columbia experience. The photo that you see is the first and only homecoming or football game that I ever attended. I decided one was quite enough. Columbia does not have a great football team. This was me doing research in Jordan. So I ended up finishing my program in Jordan and staying in the country and staying in Paris afterwards to take a semester off, where I was able to sort of do research on refugee communities. And that's something that was possible. I had discussed it with my advisor, and yeah, I ended up taking this gap right in the middle of university to do something that I thought was important, and was able to come back to the university thereafter and implement those learnings in my academic work. That picture that you see there is taken from the 6-month break, and it was actually right after being tear gassed in Calais. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to engage with the refugee community had I not done these programs in Jordan and Paris. Unfortunately, it's covered, but what you can see in the background is a picture from the research that I did in Brazil. I did a Columbia program which took part literally in the rainforest in Brazil, in the Atlantic rainforest, where we studied, I guess, the impact of different consumer practices on, soil compaction and just general quality of food, water, air, and communities in Brazil. And I got to research about something that I really cared about, which was the impact of animal agriculture on environmental efforts. And then the picture in the middle is actually an opportunity that the UAE government invited several Columbia students from the UAE or with a connection to the UAE to participate in. It was a talk, a brainstorming session actually, at the UAE mission to the United Nations. It was called a Youth Thinkin', where they had these youth basically propose ideas for the government on youth-related issues like health, like technology, like the environment. So it was a real honor, and I honestly am to this day friends with several of the people who I met, including some of the members of the government who were there. So it was quite amazing. All opportunities that I would not have imagined I'd been able to take part in. So I hope that today we've sufficiently covered broadly why Columbia is amazing. At Columbia, you have, I guess not just one area that the university is particularly strong for. You know, you might have certain universities that are very strong in engineering. Columbia actually shines all the way through. It has one of the best law schools in the world. It has CEPA, which is one of the world's best international relations and public policy schools in the world. It has the journalism school, which, as I said, is linked to the Pulitzer Prize and is considered one of the strongest in the world as well. Has an amazing engineering school, has an incredible medical school, and is therefore somewhere that I would recommend for anyone, no matter what they want to study. I chose Columbia because for anthropology, it was very strong, and for Middle Eastern studies. I was a big fan of Edward Said, and he was, of course, a professor at Columbia University. So you'll see a poll launched now, which asks what you want to major in. Please answer it. Would love to see what everyone's thinking about. But I think what I really wanted to get to today is the Q&A. So I'll just wrap up our presentation here. If you do want support for getting to a university like Columbia, do get in touch with us. We'll provide you with a free initial consultation, and then we can make a tailored program that suits your need. And yeah, let's get to the questions. Hang on. All right, we have a lot of questions today. So Mariam, you've asked, what GPA should I get? Columbia definitely is a university where to get in, you would have to have very strong GPA. So definitely over a 3.5. With American universities, there's no cutoff. So it's not like you're going to be rejected by just immediately for not having a particularly high GPA. Of course, if it's really low, that will certainly be the case. But they're looking at you holistically as a whole applicant. So you can see that Columbia here has a 6.1% regular round acceptance rate. But that's the global acceptance rate. Remember that international students make up about 20% of the incoming class in an undergraduate degree. So Columbia actually has the highest international student population of any Ivy League university at around 20%. So realistically, we're talking less than 400 students internationally admitted to Columbia every year. So definitely being academically strong is essential. Yeah. All right. Next question. Does Columbia University have a medicine program? Yes, it does have a medicine program. Columbia is in the United States, though, and the medicine programs in the United States are postgraduate. So you would have to do 4 years first of another degree and then go to medical school. And you complete what's called your pre-med requirements. So you could study something like biology or neuroscience or chemistry, complete pre-med, and then Pre-med would be your list of classes you might have to take, like organic chemistry is a famous one. And then you would apply to med school. So you don't go directly into med school. It's actually, the organic chemistry actually has one of Columbia's most famous traditions. It's called Orgo Night. Every year before the organic chemistry exam, the marching band would come into the library and start playing music at midnight in order to disrupt the students studying for the exam. This is one of Columbia's most famous and honored traditions. Yeah. Yasmin, would you like to read out the questions to me, since I can't actually see them?
So we have a question asking, what was your SAT score?
Oh, good question. I did the SAT, the old SAT, so it was out of 2,400, and I think I got 2,340 or something like that. So I got 800 in the writing and reading sections, and then whatever the difference is for maths. Clearly, I'm not a mathematician. And then for the subject test, I took English literature and US history, and I got 760 and 720, I think. Yes.
Awesome. So we have a question from Hanin. She's asking, does Columbia University have a medicine program?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it has a very good med school.
Another question, is it true that there is a lot of elitism at Columbia?
Interesting. I was actually going to talk about this, but Columbia is considered the activist Ivy. So I would say, of course, like in all Ivy Leagues, you have people who are come from generational wealth, and they're legacy students, and we even have a secret society called St. Anthony Hall. If anyone watched Gossip Girl, it's what Hamilton Hall was based off. But it's really not very big. It's nothing like the eating clubs at Harvard, or the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, or the eating clubs, I think, at Princeton. So it's just not on that scale. And I would say probably because Columbia is more international and because it's located in the city. In fact, being located in the city is one of the coolest things, because in a school like Harvard, Princeton, or Yale, you're in a small town. You're in, New Haven, Connecticut, or you're in Princeton, New Jersey. And so much of the social life of students is actually based on the campus. Now, some students really want that. They want that Dartmouth-style social life where everyone around you, all the students know each other, because there's not much else going on. But Columbia's in New York City, so most of the students have a social life outside of campus. They're going to plays, concerts, restaurants, parks, shows in New York, hanging out with NYU students, or getting internships. So I think students maybe just don't have time to focus on these kind of secret societies that other Ivy Leagues are famous for, and which are really quite elitist. We just don't really have that at Columbia.
Another question. I am an IB student. I'm interested in biology majors. Do I need to take any higher level IB courses to be eligible for admission?
Yes, really you should. You should take at least 3 HLs. In the UK, it matters very specifically which HLs you take for different subjects. But since you don't apply directly to a subject in the US, you have 1 year to really think about what you want to do before committing to a major. You don't need to necessarily do that. So it doesn't matter which subjects you take for the US. It just matters that you do well in them and you're able to engage meaningfully with them. But yeah, you should be doing HLs. Yeah. Academics, as you can see here, are just one part of the application, but they're still really important. And what we want to see from a successful applicant is that their academics aligns with their extracurricular engagement and their personal qualities. And the US application system is designed to draw all of this out of you. So you have essays that really test or allow you to explore who you are as a person. And an admissions officer is going to be looking at you as a whole story, as a holistic applicant. So they will look at your grades, your HLs, your SATs, and all these things, but then they'll see, is the person you're describing yourself as in your essays reflected in the extracurriculars you've done? If someone talks about themselves as a philanthropist and altruistic, but they have zero volunteering activities, you know, it doesn't look very credible, right? Or if someone talks about themselves as an entrepreneur and they're going to be a budding computer scientist or the next Elon Musk, but they've never actually built anything, taken in any initiative, tried to build a company or a product, then again, it's not super credible. So what they want to see is that you engage with the stuff that you're learning at school. You are able to take it out of the school context, build something real with it, like build your own company or startup, and hopefully link it to something personal, like to a cause that you care about. Maybe your startup raises money for a cause that's important to you, or maybe you find some way to connect your passion with helping other people, I would say. And then at the bottom of that is institutional priorities. So a few years ago, Melinda Gates donated $15 million to Duke's computer science department. That year, Duke had an increased ability to take on computer science students. So if you're a comp sci student and you applied to Duke, that year you had a higher chance of getting in than previous years. So that's kind of how the application process is working. Like I said, we're going to do some deep dives into the application process later on in this series. Yeah.
Amazing. So we have a question from Diana. She is asking, is it late for me to apply to undergraduate course? Do you think the experience at Columbia at an undergraduate level is better than a graduate level?
I can't say better or worse because I haven't studied at Columbia as a master's student. We have some people on this call who have, but I think, you know, Columbia is very well known for both. And I would say, you know, why do one or the other when you can do both? The deadlines have passed for this year, but when I was applying, I actually started the process of applying very, very late and realized I was not eligible for Columbia University. I graduated with excellent academics, but to my surprise, was kind of an uncompetitive applicant. I engaged with Crimson back in the day. So Crimson helped me get into Columbia. I was our first student from this region. And they encouraged me to take a gap year, work on my standardized tests, get some internships, build up my profile. I was applying with an arts-based profile. So during that gap year, I did an internship in Russia. I worked at the Hermitage Museum. I did some volunteer work in other countries, particularly Vietnam. I did an internship at Brunswick here in Dubai, really built up a solid profile, and then applied after a gap year and ended up getting in. So if you feel that you're too late, and I got a scholarship as well. So if you think you're too late, I would always encourage, take a year off. It's a good time to do that anyway, just to see what happens in the world. Work on your profile, build up a stellar application, and then apply, because it's worth the wait. And if you're thinking that you don't want to take an extra year off now, because you're worried about it causing you to be behind everyone else, think about it this way. If we know that graduates from Ivy League schools or graduates from schools like Columbia get to a certain point in their career 2 or 3 times faster than their peers at other universities around the world, or they graduate with higher salaries or whatever it is, then don't think of yourself as being a year behind if you take a gap year to apply, because you might graduate still 2 or 3 years ahead of your peers, even if you take this year off now to focus on your application.
We have a question from Ishani. She's asking, how important is the extracurricular background of the student to get admitted at Columbia?
Well, it's really important, because if we say that like 40,000 students apply to Columbia undergraduate, and there's a 6% regular acceptance rate. I think this year it was even lower. It was lower than that. Probably around 10,000 students would have stellar academics, meaning like they would have top grades, We know that Harvard has said that it could fill up its incoming class 3 times just with the valedictorians, so just with the head boy or head girl, top academics from all the students who apply. So around 10,000 of these applicants, or a quarter of the applicants, have perfect grades. They've done Duke of Edinburgh or Model UN or debate. They're on a sports team. They play musical instrument. And yet they're only accepting, like I said, 400 international students, or 2,000 students total. So it's just impossible to stand out with just good grades. We have many former admissions officers working for Crimson, and they've told us the same thing. You can try stand out by academics, but unless you're the Olympiad champion, it's very, very difficult. So your extracurriculars and your essays are where you really shine. But like I said, they're not going to look at those other things if you don't have the strong academics. Yeah, I'll give you a Princeton example. 9% of students who apply to Princeton with a 4.0 GPA, the highest you can get accepted. You're 3 times more likely to get accepted to Princeton with a 4.0 than with a 3.5. But 9%, it's not a lot. Similarly, 8% of students with SAT scores above 1,500 who apply to Princeton get in. It's a minority. So if you're just focusing on your grades, you get your foot in the door, but you don't really go further than that. The extracurriculars, who you are as a person, is what's going to get you in. They really want to know, and not just can you do well in a test, but what kind of values are you going to bring to the campus? Columbia, like I said, is considered the activist Ivy. So it wants to know how deeply you engage with the world around you. They have alumni like Barack Obama. Stanford has Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. They want to know, do you have that thing that makes this school what it is?
Great. So, Soraya, we have loads of questions asking us whether it is possible to study law degree at Columbia University.
Law is one of the most famous degrees at Columbia. So both Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Barack Obama studied at Columbia Law School. Amal Clooney, the wife of George Clooney and one of the most brilliant human rights lawyers in the world, is a teacher of the law school at Columbia. So definitely possible, yes.
A question from Malek. She's asking, any advice on writing college essays specifically for Columbia?
Well, I wrote my essay on Legally Blonde. So I came from the British system of education and really learned to write essays in a particular way. The British schools teach you to never use personal pronouns. Don't use the word I or me. Don't use humor. It's got to be objective. It's got to be academic and all of these things. And that's great for British universities, but American universities function completely differently, with the exception of maybe the UC schools. American universities really want to know your personality, and they are trying to test not only are you committed to your subject, which is the primary function of UK university essays, they want to know who you are. So, UChicago had an essay prompt that was just find X. So you could write about a maths problem, you could write a pirate story, you could write so many things. They also had, you're on a voyage sailing across the tempestuous sea in the 13th century. What if suddenly you fell off the edge of the earth? Now, there's obviously no right answer to this, but if you were an astrophysics major wanting to study astrophysics, you might use that as an opportunity to flex what you know about that field. You might talk about the materials you'd want to observe. Whereas if I was a psychology major, I would probably use that Freud's analysis or Freud's method for interpretation of dreams to write about a situation where you're diagnosing a patient who comes in and has a dream in which they fall off the edge of the earth. So it's supposed to be very creative. I wrote about Elle Woods and the movie Legally Blonde because I have a Chihuahua and I'm a vegetarian, and I was sitting looking up university admissions, and Legally Blonde was the first moment that I even thought about Ivy League universities. I didn't know what they were. I had never considered going to a university in America, and I would say that's the moment that it planted the seed for me that I wanted to study in the US. And I suddenly had this, like, I don't know, revelation that my situation as a vegetarian looking at universities in the US was quite familiar. And I shared that with my mum, and she went and pulled out a letter that I wrote to Reese Witherspoon when I was 7 years old, telling her that because of her, I was going to study in the US and I was going to become a vegetarian because she's an animal rights lawyer in the movie and all these things. So that was one of the things that I wrote about. So I would say just be creative. Obviously, you don't want to be cheesy. So when you're talking about sensitive or personal issues, you have to find the right tone that makes for an engaging, exciting, and still sophisticated essay. We had a student at Crimson who was like a brilliant chemist, a gold Olympiad medalist in chemistry, just super wonderful, but felt like there was a lot of humanity missing from his application. So he used the essay as an opportunity to write about his relationship with his father as a personal bond. So when we're advising students at Crimson, we tell them to make sure everything is connected into a cohesive story. So your extracurriculars, your essays, your interviews, all of these things are telling the same story about who you are as a person, what drives you, what motivates you, how do you think? Yeah, so make sure it's all relevant. It's like if you apply for a job and your CV has a million different sectors and a million different positions, it doesn't really tell a clear story of where you're going. But if everything that you do relates to something else, then it's very easy for the reader of that resume to make a prediction about what your future will be.
We have a great question from Malak. So she's asking you to share an important lesson you learned attending Columbia that you don't believe you would have learned elsewhere.
Oh, the more, I don't know. I think at Columbia really humbled me because I went from being a high schooler who, was used to doing extremely well in school. I thought I had it cracked, like I knew everything. And then you get to university and you go from being the big fish in your little pond, like the smartest kid in your school. Many students were the smartest kids in their schools. And suddenly you're at this institution where everyone else is smarter than you. So everyone, I guess a lot of students, if they don't have a strong support system, they might feel overwhelmed or self-conscious because they suddenly are not the smartest person in the room anymore. But for me, I loved that. And it really humbled me. And it taught me to surround myself with people that were better than me and to really appreciate that they were better than me because I could learn from it. So I just loved that experience. I lived for one summer in a house full of engineers, and they were all different kinds of engineers. And I'm a humanities major, so I don't understand. I did one engineering class and just never again. But one was a mechanical engineer, one was electrical, one was computer, one was biomedical. They were all working on different kinds of robot hands: surgical robot, a robot that paints, a robot that 3D printed food. And I was so humbled by it. I loved it, and I decided then to always be surrounded by people who know more than me, so I can learn from them. So that's something I took away from it. Also, everyone has different opinions about stuff, and university campus kind of intensifies that. So I learned to really appreciate the discourse of difference. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. We have also a lot of questions about the scholarships. So let me just pick one question. How do scholarships work at Columbia University?
So Columbia in the US, you have two different systems for financial aid. You have need blind schools and need aware schools. So need blind schools do not check whether or not you're applying for aid when they decide whether or not to admit you. So there are 6 need blind schools. Does anyone know who they are? You can write it in the chat if you do. Only 6 in America. So 6 schools do not check whether or not you're applying for aid when they decide to admit you. They admit you first, and then they see how much you need to contribute. Let's see if anyone has the right answers here. Harvard and Princeton, yes. MIT, Yale. And then Amherst. So a lot of students might not know Amherst. Amherst is one of them. Yeah. NYU Abu Dhabi, Johns Hopkins, exactly. So these are the need blind schools. Every other school is need aware. So what that means is that when they decide to admit you, they're going to take it into consideration, whether you're applying for aid. So it can mean that if two students have the exact same profile, all things considered, and one needs full aid and one doesn't need any aid at all, they'll likely admit the one who doesn't need aid. But this is a broad generalization. So the degree to which schools are need aware is very different. So NYU New York, for instance, is a school that is very much need aware. They will admit someone, if someone has excellent academics, extracurriculars, etc., but needs 100% financial aid, and someone else has pretty good academics, pretty good extracurriculars, but is willing to pay full fees, they'll admit that student over the other one, over the one who needs the full aid. However, at a school like Columbia or Brown or U Chicago, although they're need aware, they're still prioritizing academics over everything else. They have extremely high endowments, which means they have a lot of money, and they just simply want to compete with all the other Ivies, and they want to have the best students in the world at their campus. So they will not. They're very unlikely to admit someone who needs financial aid. And the general rule is that if your parents earn $68,000 a year or less, you're pretty likely to get full financial aid at a school like Harvard or Columbia. And if they earn up to $150,000, you're approximately likely to pay 10% of your income. But it's a very complex system. So they'll look at also how many dependents you have. So are your parents taking care of other kids? Are they taking care of their parents? They'll look at your mortgages. They'll look at any other kind of assets and liabilities that you have and make a decision about what it's fair for you to contribute. So at Columbia, around 60% of students are on scholarship or financial aid. Mine was both need and merit-based. So it increased every year if I maintained good grades. Yeah.
Amazing. We have a question from Lena. She's asking, is AP or IB preferred by Columbia? And how are these two curriculums viewed by the admissions committee?
Great question. So I'll add A-level in there as well, because some people might have questions about that. Generally, IB and A-levels are considered advanced curricula. So what that means is that if you do well in them, you actually get college credits. So you can graduate early, save your parents a few $1,000s, which is good news for everyone. If you're getting A stars or 7s. They're both advanced curricula, and there's really no, your decision to do IB or A-level should be based on what suits you more and not what's better, because they're both on equal basis. With the American curriculum, APs are of course advanced. They are college level courses that you can also get credit for, like A-levels and like HLs in your IB system. However, the average amount of number of APs taken by Ivy League students is 7 to 12. And I know in the MENA region, not all schools allow students to take more than 5. So if you're doing APs, you have just as good a chance of getting into an Ivy League school as if you're doing IB or A-levels, provided that you take enough of them, enough APs. So yeah, at least 7. I would say also there are other factors to consider here. So APs allow you to engage with more specific kinds of subjects. There's a wider range of subjects to choose from. So if that interests you, then maybe you want to do APs. A-level, you choose only 3 or 4 subjects. So you can go very deeply into the subjects that you like. And IB gives you this sort of very well-rounded education. It's a bit like the core in that you have your theory of knowledge, you have extended essay, you have to do that, you have your CAS project, so it's more rounded. So I would say that it really suits it's really up to the individual, and which curriculum to take depends on who you are as a person, what you enjoy, what your goals are, and whether you like the idea of taking a lot of subjects or engaging very deeply in a few subjects and having full control over the subjects that you do take. With A levels, you have full control. You choose exactly what you want to do. Many of our students, though, combine them. So they do IB and take extra A levels, or they take extra APs, or they do A levels and they do APs on top of that, or they do an American curriculum, they do a few A levels as well. So IB is not stackable. Like you can't add IB to A level or AP, but you can add A levels and APs to anything else. So you can tailor it and do a variety of subjects. We actually offer that as well. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Does Columbia require SAT subject tests? If I do not submit an SAT subject, will I be disadvantaged?
Well, good question. I'm so glad you asked this. The College Board has actually announced that they will be canceling all SAT subject tests. So they will be no more SAT subject tests in the future. Instead, you can focus on doing something like an AP or an extra subject, because you're going to get credits for it, which is cool. You'll get college credits. An AP, for those who don't know, is a college level course that's part of the American curriculum that students of all curricula can take.
Does Columbia assist in the process of obtaining an F1 visa?
So Columbia will do what all other universities do, which is, help you. I mean, they give you the invitation letter that says that you're applying, but they don't, book the appointments or anything for you, but they give you everything that you'd need from a university to do that, to apply for a visa. It was not a terribly difficult experience. Yeah, cool. Just for those listening, I've put up a QR code so that if you want to have an individual session, because we still have around 50 questions that haven't been answered yet, and I don't want us to run out of time, but I want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to ask individual questions. So scan that QR code and you can submit a form to have a personalized one-on-one session with an advisor. All right, we can keep going with the questions.
Yeah, so we have a question from Sophia. She's asking, what are some of the qualities you need to be accepted into the Ivy League colleges?
I would say you need to be someone who has engagement with your community, whether that's your school, your religious community, a charity that you're passionate about, and you have to be academic, but you also have to have, I guess, an ambitious idea of the role you want to have in the world in the future.
Another good question. So extracurriculars, will I have to have started something big and impactful to my society to be considered in this category?
I often tell parents that they don't want you to necessarily create a company that's acquired by Amazon or Facebook, but they want to see that you have taken initiative, you have projects that you've started, and you're able to show growth. It can be growth within your communities, right? It doesn't have to be 1,000 people. It could be 1,000 people. It could be 100,000, but it could also be up to 100 people. And there's really no hard and fast answer to this. It all depends on how you communicate what you've done. So you can actually write a great essay about a pretty small project that you did where you learned loads and it really affected you, I guess, internally. And or you could do something huge, large scale, and communicate it so poorly that no one can really understand what it is that you did. So I would say it's not about, like I said, being the Olympiad champion. That is one pathway to Columbia, being an academic superstar or being an athlete, but about having a profile that is built up of small things that you do really well that together tell a really great story of who you are. And in this series, one of the episodes that we're going to be running is a case study breakdown. So we're going to break down accepted student profiles. So please make sure you attend this session. And we'll go through like exactly the extracurriculars they did, how they got in, what were their essays and so on. So you can see, with more clarity what an accepted student profile looks like.
A question from Anika. Is it preferred to do IB or A-level?
So like I said, they're viewed on an equal basis. It depends on the student. Yeah.
All right. Another question. What extracurriculars did you do for Columbia?
Great question. So when I was in high school, I had the misconception that I needed to do everything. And be involved in as many projects and clubs and societies as possible. So I was on the debate team. I did 2 varsity sports teams. I did the theater club. I was in the choir. I played 3 musical instruments. I'm very type A. Art club, philosophy club, writing club, wrote for the school newspaper, wrote independently for other, contributed 1 or 2 articles to other newspapers. But this was actually not the right approach. So I thought that made me a strong applicant. I graduated, was not a strong applicant to my dismay, and instead took that year off to really focus on building a profile that is at Crimson what we like to call well lopsided. So it's well-rounded, but with a clear bend in one direction. And I decided my profile was going to be about arts because I was thinking at the time that I was going to go into the arts. I had done art, A-level, art history, classics and history. So very humanities focused. When I took my internship at Dubai, I specifically asked the organization if I could work with their art clients, which included the Louvre, the Guggenheim, and Art Dubai, and the Ministry of Culture. And then I did my internship at the Hermitage Museum in Russia. So I got to, that was obviously art focused. It's the 2nd largest museum in the world. And then also submitted an art portfolio supplement. So you have the opportunity to submit paintings. I really like painting and drawing to the university as a supplement. So I did that as well. And therefore that application, which was focused, was much, much, much stronger than my high school version of myself, which just really had no focus.
Another question from Noor. So she's asking, how are the dorms in Columbia?
Very variable. So you have the option, you have some dorms which are big buildings and every student has their own room, and then you have shared bathrooms. You have some where, so that's like a classic dorm where you just have your individual room and every student has their individual room. There are some buildings where it's more like an apartment with 3 bedrooms and you share with other people. So you have like flatmates, 3 or 4. And then of course in Barnard you have the same, but it's all single sex, which is really nice for some people. So you'll be with other girls. And then there are also apartments. So I stayed in Columbia Apartments. So there's that option too. Because I'd had a gap year, I was a non-traditional student and was able to, that option was open to us. But it's also open to people who are married or people who have kids or people who live with family and things like that. And then of course, if you can choose your own accommodation as well. I have to say the food was pretty good. I am a vegetarian and we had Beyond Burgers, Beyond Meat, salad bars, vegan pizza, everything that you could imagine on the 4 dining facilities on campus.
Can I apply if I come from an Indian school system?
Definitely. Indian school system is considered a strong one, so it's right up there. That's not going to harm you.
We have a great question. So I'm very much into writing and have written pieces for over 8 different organizations. How would you recommend compiling all of them into one activity on the Common App, especially considering the fact that you only get 150 characters to explain?
So the Common App gives you a really good insight into what the universities are looking for, because they ask you to list 10 activities in order of importance, and they specifically ask how long you engaged with everything, for how many hours per week, and any awards or honors or mentions that you received. So that alone, the fact that they ask you all those questions, shows that they want you to engage deeply with things. So I would put that as one extracurricular. And then in the additional information section, you could even create a document with the clippings of all the publications, and submit that. Perhaps it might be in the portfolio section or additional information. And so in the extracurricular, you could say, see attached document for clippings, or if you have space, you can list them right in there. But yeah, I had done that as well. I had written an article about like situation in Tibet, and had it published in the Dalai Lama's newspaper, and I just included it right in the application.
Awesome. How to do AP courses as GCSE students?
Oh, great. Well, get in touch with us. We can help you arrange that. We offer them. So just you'll get an email after this, but otherwise you can use that QR code or contact us, email us, and mention that this is something that you want to do, and we can give you the information about it.
We have a question from Uzair. So he is asking, is it possible to get into the Ivy League even if you aren't sure of what you want to do as a career?
Yes, this is one of the great things about the US liberal arts education system. You do not have to know what you want to study. You can even wait until your second or third year to declare your major. So I went in economics and political science, and for a while I had a triple major, which was film, anthropology, and Middle Eastern studies. So none of the things I thought I was going to do. And honestly, I think this is one of the best things about studying in the US. In high school, you don't actually have the opportunity to engage meaningfully with many subjects. If you'd asked me what anthropology was in high school, I would not have been able to tell you. So when you get to campus, you get to try classes. I took Russian literature classes with a famous Russian scholar. You get to take art classes, you could take economics classes. I took a poli-sci class and realized I did not like that subject at all. So yeah, definitely explore. This is something that you don't have the opportunity to do in the UK or Australia or many other places.
Can 3.5 GPA get me into Columbia?
If you have a very strong profile and really, really well-developed essays, yes, it can. There's not like a cutoff, like a strict cutoff, let's say. They're going to look at you as a whole person. So if you're an athlete who might be recruited to one of the teams, then having a 3.5 would be fine. If you are a budding entrepreneur, I mean, it really depends. They're going to look at the whole story.
We have a question asking about whether Columbia University offers the astrophysics as a major, and if yes, is it for undergrad or postgrad?
Yes, you can do it as an undergrad, totally. Yeah.
What is the best major to study in Columbia University?
I can't say the best one, but several that Columbia are really famous for at the undergrad level. It's very famous for anthropology. Actually, one of the founding fathers of anthropology died at Columbia while having lunch while visiting from the UK, Franz Boas. And the legend goes that he died having lunch and he collapsed onto Levi Strauss, who then became the leading figure of anthropology. So he kind of passed the baton, so to speak. A rather legendary tale. Anthropology is very famous. Obviously, economics, one of the most popular degrees at Columbia, because Columbia feeds into Wall Street. So when I was there, we would have 3 events per day, maybe, by financial institutions and banks that were solely focused on recruitment, where you could meet recruiters and get internships. So it was very easy for my economics major or finance major friends to get jobs on Wall Street or McKinsey or BCG and all these other big firms in consulting or finance. And also you have superstar professors. You may know Jeffrey Sachs or Joseph Stiglitz, who are like celebrity professors in fields like economics. Jeffrey Sachs is a hero to many people, and you can take classes with him as an undergrad. So economics is probably a really famous one. The physics department is known for something perhaps a little bit more malevolent, which would be being the place where the Manhattan Project was conceived. But that just goes to show you what an important institution, you know, Columbia was in global history. Things like journalism, law, medicine, you can't take as an undergrad, but the other ones for sure. It's also very popular for people who want to study the arts. So I mentioned that Columbia has one of the highest proportions of Oscar winners than any other university in the US. You have a lot of art historians, because as a Columbia student, you have amazing access to all of the museums in New York, which are free for students. And it's very connected to Broadway, theater, film. Many shows like House of Cards were actually written by Columbia graduates. Orange is the New Black as well. So it's very popular for film, theater, and art as well.
Amazing. Another question from Albina. So she's asking, can a CBSE student do AP? And what else can I do to support my extracurricular? Because I couldn't do much due to low opportunities in my environment.
So yes, a CBSE student can do APs. You can, do them after school. Just let us know if that's something you want to explore. Now, it's really interesting point here, because I would say low opportunities in your environment are actually the perfect opportunity to create something. So entrepreneurial experience is definitely the best thing that a student can do, not only because universities and admissions officers love it, but because it really does teach you very important real world skills: people management, creativity, design thinking, business analytics, that kind of thing. And what is entrepreneurship if not creating something where it doesn't exist, or finding a solution for a problem that has no solution currently? So when students tell me that they don't have XYZ, or they don't have this opportunity, or there's no club at their school, that's the best opportunity to create one. It's much harder to create a new club in a place where all of the possible clubs exist, So think about what you would have liked and create that.
Is there any age limit to apply and get admitted to Columbia and other universities?
Well, if you mean lower limit, no. I mean, there are some like 14-year-old kids, but it's really not a good idea to apply until you've finished high school, because to be that 14-year-old kid who gets accepted, you have to, already be, it's not enough to just be smart. You have to be kind of doing university level mathematics and making discoveries, or doing Olympiad competitions when you're still a child, and go through an entire high school curriculum very quickly. We did have one student who did that, who I think went to university at like 14 for mathematics, but it's not encouraged, because it's hard enough to get into a school like Columbia, even when you have finished high school and you do have amazing extracurriculars. So it's just very unlikely that someone will get in earlier. If you're talking about an upper limit, no, Columbia actually likes students who are mature, or who've had professional experience. They have a direct pathway for non-traditional applicants, which includes people who've taken a gap year, or people who've had a break, who've joined the military, or who've had a professional experience. We had one person who became a dot-com giant in the 90s, and was part of the early kind of boom of the internet, and came back to study at Columbia, had never done an undergraduate degree. So that's not discouraged at all. In fact, Eisenhower started that program after World War II to welcome soldiers to the university.
We have a very good question. So someone is asking, I haven't applied for the AP exams and I understand that I'm late to apply. The country I live in, Kuwait, has no AP centers. Can I apply for the AP exams through Crimson?
Possibly. The deadlines have passed, but you could email us and we can see if something can be done for you. But it would not be in Kuwait. It would have to be in Bahrain or Saudi or the UAE. So if you're willing to travel to one of those places to take the exam, then yes, it could be arranged potentially. So let us know. Good question. Well, guys, all right. Yeah, we have 15 more minutes. So yes, let's take some more questions.
Soraya,
You guys are very active. Sorry?
Would you like to pick a question from the questions?
Yes, I'll have to stop sharing my screen so I can have a look. But you guys are so active and engaged. We have 80 questions, 85 questions, which is so exciting in total. Yasmin, perhaps you could share one of the pages that I've just shared.
Yep.
And I'll pick some of these questions. We'll keep going for 15 minutes. Are libraries busy during exams? Noor, yes, they are. It's impossible to get a spot at some of the libraries during the exam time. In fact, a lot of students will go at like 3 in the morning and put their bags there and either sleep on the library or go back to their dorms and come back at 7 just to be able to study there. It's very, very difficult to get a spot. It's quite crazy, actually. Yeah. For undergrad programs in computer science, may I know the tuition fees? So actually, the tuition fees don't differ according to what you study. So it's just a flat tuition fee. Columbia is actually the most expensive university in the United States, but it's also one of the most generous with scholarships. I want to apply for the Fu Foundation Engineering School at Columbia, aka CEES. For Columbia admissions, do applicants have to apply to Columbia in general, or do the applicants need to apply to the specific school? You need to apply to the specific school. It's got a different application process, Barnard as well, GS as well, and yeah, you apply directly to there, and that school is going to determine whether or not you get in. Were there additional costs to go on the trips, or were they included? So flights you have to take care of. For accommodation, you could choose a dormitory or to be billeted with a family. So I stayed with a Palestinian family in Jordan and a Moroccan family in Paris because I was working on my Arabic and I wanted to speak at home. So I didn't end up getting accommodation. Meals are included. I think there are some funding or scholarship options you can apply for the trips themselves, but you also pay for the credits at the same rate that you would pay for the classes at Columbia too. My grades in freshman year are relatively poor. Is it all right if I get 43 to 45 in the IBDP and 1550 plus in the SAT? Will that be sufficient to get my foot in the proverbial admission store? I love this question. In the UK universities, they do look at your earlier grades a lot more. I think in your case for the US, what I would want to see as an admissions officer is their story. So how come they were poor and then you're getting 43 to 45? Maybe talk about that in some of your essays, or really you can submit a letter of extenuating circumstance if you have a specific reason they were poor in freshman year, or you can just mention how you were able to motivate yourself. I wouldn't make that the focus of the essay, but it could maybe be brought in as something, as part of another topic. But no, I don't think that would be prohibitive. Remember that you're applying a full year in advance. So it's, they're not going to necessarily have your IBDP. They will have your predicted grades. And hopefully, I mean, they'll have your SAT score as well. And then anything else you can do, if you can do extra subjects, do extra courses, maybe do some APs, you're going to have additional like credibility, because that predicted grade is not necessarily reliable. You know, some schools get that wrong. Are there jobs for students on campus? Yes, you can work in the dining facilities, the libraries, the shops. You can work as a tour guide. You can work in the admissions office for sure. Are SAT scores compulsory? Because under the course requirements, it only requires 3.5 GPA. Yes, well, they waived requirements this year, so they made it optional because of COVID. However, they also admitted a record low number of students. So that shows that, you know, without SATs, they're less likely to, or they're less willing to admit international students. The SATs play a very important role in institutions like Ivy League schools, because they allow the university to compare students from all different curricula, Emirati curricula, A-level, IB, South African, Australian, and they allow it to be done, you know, pretty fairly. So without the SATs, they don't have this opportunity to compare you. And we're pretty confident that, you know, the universities are still going to want students to be submitting SATs or ACTs. You can sub it for an ACT. They see both equally. Where did I coach for the SAT? Jayanthi, I took Crimson tutoring, actually. Do you think mentioning a Coursera course I took by a Columbia professor who really inspired me a lot would help my application? Yes, talk about this professor, talk about how you want to take their classes, what it meant to you. I read a book in high school on Cold War history, the Cold War in the Middle East by Rashid Khalidi, and I talked about that and how I really, you know, I loved the way he thought. I wanted to take classes with him. I did end up taking classes with him. So that shows that you've done your research. You are applying to this university, not just because you see it on a ranking, but because you really like the way they teach. This is important for the university because they want to know that you're not going to get there and drop out because you don't like the core, or you don't like the teachers. So all of these are important indicators for them. Are people over 42 years of age with 20 years engineering experience accepted for postgrad admissions in engineering programs generally? Yes, of course. It depends though. You still have to do the exams. You still have to write a good application. It's not an automatic acceptance, but yeah, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to get into a school, a postgrad program. Does Columbia require specific APs for each major? No, but it helps if you're applying for engineering and you have physics or maths, but it's not a strict requirement. I'm a fencer in the national Saudi team and I've won international medals. Can it be one of my main things? Yes, fencing is an NCAA recruitable sport. So you could actually get recruited to the fencing team. Please email us. I don't know who you are because you're anonymous on here, but fencing is a great one to have on your application. And there's a whole different process for applications for recruitable athletes. So athletes who are, you know, Olympic level or playing in national teams. So let us know. I'll send you some information about how to get recruited. You can look up the NCAA website. This is it's a very good thing to have on your profile. Does it make a difference for a person having a green card, not yet a national, and the one who doesn't have a green card for tuition fees? The fees, no, but you get access to different sources of funding. So state funding, federal funding, and loans that you may not have as an international student. Yeah. How important are recommendation letters? Very important. They add another layer to the personal qualities a university is trying to understand from your applications, and a more objective one too. And I've heard from our former admissions officers from Stanford and from some Ivy League universities that without the tests, like in the COVID era, without SAT subject tests and stuff, the recommendations are more important than ever. They're relying more heavily on these. Yeah. Do master's students live on campus or on some sort of Columbia housing? You have the option. You can choose your own apartment or you can live in Columbia housing. Yes, apartments. Do you have a good chance to get into Columbia with a 1400 SAT? Unfortunately, no. We really would want to see 1500 or above. Maybe 1450 if you're an internationally competitive athlete, like Olympic team athlete. Let's see. Can I apply for the engineering program through CBSC, scores from India plus SAT and extracurriculars, and being recognized as a young scientist at the international level, and excelled in sports and arts, but lost my grades due to a serious medical condition? Yes, you have a section to provide a letter of extenuating circumstances where you can explain any gaps in your education or any studies, the path for non-traditional students. They will probably be very understanding of this. Do universities in Canada have similar features like US? I would say it's kind of right in the middle of US and UK. So you have something that resembles the liberal arts education system. You have financial aid, but only for Canadians. But Canada is more focused like the US in that you apply to a subject, and it's a bit more academically focused. You know, in the UK, if you're studying medicine, the university really isn't paying attention to the musical instrument you played or the sport you did. Whereas in America, they really do want to see those things. They want to see who you are as a person. So, you know, Canada's somewhere in between. Let's see. How do you choose a major? Do you need music, PE, art, or can one do that outside of school? One can do that outside of school, for sure. I would say the best way to choose a major at an American university is to try the classes and see how you like it. I never intended to be an anthropologist. I just started doing anthropology classes and I kept doing more and more and more because I just loved it. So then I found myself an anthropology major. Yeah. All right. So as Columbia is called the Social Impact Ivy, should one mold their extracurriculars for social impact or pursue majors? One or the other, try mix both. So if your major or your targeted major is business or finance, then try build a finance, based project that has a social impact. Don't make it cookie cutter. Don't try to be the person you think they want. If you don't really care about anything, I think everyone cares about something. I think everyone has a course that they care about. Don't do the one you think they need you to do, like Habitat for Humanity. In fact, some of these projects like Habitat for Humanity that everyone does are not that meaningful because it's something you do for a week and never again. Rather, be creative. So we had a student who liked music and physics and built an electric violin and performed it at retirement homes across the country. So it's kind of unusual. It's not a classic volunteering project, but it does have a social or community aspect, but it's also related to the technical skills of the career that they want to go into. Or maybe, if you love robotics, we had a student who built a robotics club and started raising money to provide robotics equipment to underprivileged schools. So make it your own. Make it connect to that whole story. All right. How can I, as a high school student, get in touch with a Columbia or other university professor to get involved with a research project? Great question. You can try and email them on your own. So their email addresses are listed on the department, usually. For Columbia, I know that's the case. Crimson also offers this. We have something called Crimson Research Institute, where you can work with a professor from Columbia or from Dartmouth, from Harvard, one-on-one on a research project of your own. But yeah, otherwise you can do it by yourself. Yeah. My son is a tennis player. He was a national player for Turkey. Colombia is D1. What does he need to do to get accepted? Okay, so like I said, there is a whole different application process for athletes. It's like a whole different pathway. So I would recommend you get in touch with us and we can take you through it. Athletic recruitment is a serious business and it involves athletic campaigning, competition footage, getting in touch with coaches, but it's very worth it. I mean, you could get full scholarships. We have an athletics division and the head of the division is called Tessa Berger and she got 44 scholarships to universities. She was on the FIFA women's football team, the Olympic football team. So she's really quite an expert in that process. All right, I think that's pretty much all of them. I thank you so much. Sorry, I'll just respond to one question. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I hope it was valuable. Can you guys let me know on the chat if you thought that this was a valuable and informative session? I also thank Columbia Alumni Association for co-hosting this event. The Columbia Alumni Association is an organization that does incredible events, webinars, all to do with the Columbia alumni community here in the UAE. My position with the alumni board is helping with outreach and engagement, particularly prospective students. So that's all of you guys. Thank you so much for your kind messages. I really appreciate them. It means a lot to all of us here on the board. We want more of you guys to apply to Columbia, and we want you, of course, to join the Alumni Association afterwards. Please keep an eye out for the next session. I hope you guys were taking notes. I would love to I hope you guys were taking notes so that you can all enter the next quiz that we host at the end of during the summer and be in for an internship with the Columbia Alumni Association. Really, really grateful for your time, everyone. Have a good evening. And thank you for your 100 questions. You kept me busy.